Hey everybody, Dr. Scott McCarron. A follow up on my visit to Arlington National Cemetery and visiting my dad's grave. I was talking to my stepmother while emailing with her. I found a penny on the gravestone and I asked her if she had put it there. We read up on, my friend had read up on what a penny means and a nickel and a dime and a quarter. And it really didn't match that, so I asked her if she'd been there. And she let me know that Dad was cremated and he's in an urn in his house up in Massachusetts, not at Arlington National Cemetery. I wasn't really offended that I didn't know that. It just kind of struck me as not what I expected. But it brought up something that's I've noticed in my life. You may have had this. Like, I'll get so sure in my internal conversation and feelings that something is so that, while I'm there at Arlington National Cemetery, I'm crying and I'm there with my dad, except he's not there. And I kind of wonder, it seems like at least, I don't know if all other humans do, but it seems like I get an idea of what the truth is, and it occurs to me in a bunch of words and judgments and feelings, and that's what I hold as true. Except it's not. It's like the way I perceive the world is an extension of my internal feeling. So instead of the world being out there and it comes in, it's more like I feel it within and kind of project it out there. Now, my dad is dead. But just the whole idea that he's not in Arlington was kind of a surprise to me. On the other hand, you may have had this. I will convince myself that I'm in love with somebody and project onto them all this love and attraction and we should be together. And then they go, no, I don't like you. Never think about you. And I'm like, you loser, you traitor, you harlot, you whatever horrible word I can think of to make them wrong. But that's all going inside me, judging away. They didn't even know that I had this attraction to him until I mentioned it to him. And they're like, what are you talking about? That's not me. So it's interesting. It's like we really do live in an illusion, imaginary world, and at the same time we live in a physical one. Though I guess if you boil it down into physics, is this really solid and real? Or reflections of light? There's all sorts of astrophysicists and other science, people who've studied physics and electrons and, protons and neutrons. At least the discussion of them, the math of them. I don't know that anyone's actually seen any of these. But we talk about them as though they're real and fabricate a whole comprehension of the universe, and yet, we don't know. Kind of reminds me, and I think I've mentioned in the past, I studied religion. And one of the things that I always found interesting was, in particular, Catholicism, which they're not the only ones that did that, but some of the original church fathers that stated that, in order to be God, God has to have qualities like omniscience, omnipresence, on and on. He's all complete. Everything is done. Nothing ever changes. He's all things. And I remember sitting there looking at it and going, who are you to say that God's got to be like that? I mean, in physics, it's like we have this universe that's over here, and yet at every millisecond, all of these atomic structures are inventing life kind of new. They follow these rules, and yet sometimes they don't. And, my brief understanding of Hebrew thought has the omniscient, omnipresent in it, but there's also God's just kind of making it up now. Like the name of God is I am. It's It's not a name. God's, it's a name, but it's not a noun. It's a verb. It's a verb to be. It's the first person singular verb. That's in English. Who knows what it's like in biblical Hebrew? I'll have to talk to my one rabbi friend, and I have a couple of friends who study the Bible in college or at university. So I'm going to find out, but it's not that God has all these qualities it's more that God is. And it's like I heard people complain that God's angels don't have any emotions or freedom. Well, an angel, from what I understand, means physical manifestation of God. So this angel who's come is a physical manifestation of God. So of course it doesn't have a separate will or desire. It's an expression of God. So why would it have an expression that's free from God? It's God being expressed. And then, here I am talking all this theoretical stuff and back in my head. One of the things I've learned recently is I keep acting like my discussion of life is life. And there's this discussion of the left and right brain, and I do all this discussion, and it's supposedly in the left hemisphere is thoughts and organization. And I act like my limbic brain and my right brain, my right brain thinks in pictures, in emotion. Like when I'm playing the guitar, I'm not sitting here thinking in my head, C, E, C, G, E, D, D, I'm not combining notes. I'm like, la, 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 la. That's what I'm thinking. It's not words. And the truth is, I'm not actually even thinking that. I'm just responding to this feeling. I mean, there is sheet music when you get together with a group. You read it and play that. When you're just letting it flow, it comes from another part of you. And I suspect, if you live in your right brain and then if you live in your left brain talking about stuff and having all your judgments and concerns and opinions, and then the right brain just kind of shows up and goes, that's going to feel a lot like some weird spiritual thing or God spoke to you. It's your brain too. You have to listen to it if you want to be completely human. And then, I also got brought up with this whole idea the brain is like the central processing unit and the nerves all feed it, but it's actually all one unit. So it's just interesting that, my perception of what's true, this right brain or the brain is the central processing unit, it's all just based on how much stuff people thought was there and thought it was this way. Like I thought my dad was in Arlington National Cemetery, and he's apparently in an urn in a house in Massachusetts. When I go to Arlington National Cemetery, well, I don't know if it'll be different next time, but I sure cried the last time I was there. I was crying to my feelings about Dad and my parents and forgiveness and all that. Very easy, very interesting. I mean, human being who thinks I know what's going on and has all these explanations to prove that my theory is right, and yet I don't even allow for the 2/3 of my brain being able to communicate. And maybe that'll get buried in the National Cemetery too. In the meantime, people projecting things, Putin thinks there's a thing called Russia. Netanyahu thinks there's a thing called Israel. Iran thinks there's, it's all this internal feeling, and we're all like shooting each other and killing each other, and it has this, whatever that thing is that makes us think this way, has us all in its hands, and we all respond to it like it's a god. And yet it seems to me it's the very thing that keeps us from actually seeing. It's part of who we are, but isn't all of us. Well, I suppose somehow in my brain that connects with my dad not being at Arlington National Cemetery. But yeah, if you want to know who you are, you have to allow the part of you that isn't your inner talking opinion brain to communicate with you in its way, and you have to be alert enough to hear it when it talks. All right, thanks. As usual, come check out my website. My movie is almost completed. I sent it in to the Library of Congress to get my copyright documents and got a note it would be several months instead of like a couple of months. And then right after that, the director of the Copyright Office got fired. So at least it's registered there. I just didn't have the paperwork. I'll keep you updated on it. All right. Thank you very much.